I now call on Daniel Johnson to speak to and move the amendment 1161.3 up to around 6 minutes. Mr Johnson.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. And can I move the amendment in my name? And let me begin with a declaration. When it comes to fair work, I think deeds matter much more than posture. And in my record, I'm very clear. As a person who ran my own business, my business was the first independent retailer in Edinburgh to become an accredited living wage employer, and I stand by that, and I stand by the deeds of past Labour governments, and I think there's much that we can agree with the government's motion this afternoon, but ultimately it comes down to deeds rather than simply stated intent. But let's also be very clear. The UK Conservative Party has a wretched record on workers' rights. They have presided over an explosion in insecure work and the longest pay squeeze in history. Just in a moment, working people are facing the largest fall in living standards in a generation. And despite what Mr Fraser says, there is a ticking time bomb of mortgage payments because of the disastrous consequences of the mini-budget which he so eagerly seeks to dismiss. Happy to give way.
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Daniel Johnson for giving way. He sets out that there's much that he can agree with in the government motion, but he seeks to edit out the critical element, which is the call for the devolution of employment law. He says we should just be thinking about it. We might do it. We might do it. And meantime, asks us to trust the Labour government to deliver after a summer of flip-flops that's seen this new deal for workers absolutely torn to shreds. How on earth can we trust Labour to deliver upon its promises?
Daniel Johnson, and give the time back.
The Cabinet Secretary really must learn patience, because I was just coming to that very point. And the look is really very straightforward. And look, it is quite simple. We support the devolution of employment law. We agree with the statement made by the STUC, and we agree with them when they said that that must be done within the framework of a UK floor. And let's quote Ros Foyer, and this is what she said when that motion passed at the TUC: "A guaranteed minimum floor of workers' rights across the UK is a prudent first step, so that every worker in every workplace has a guaranteed standard of rights from day one of any future UK Labour government." That's the full position the STUC has set out. That is the full position that the Labour Party supports. It's just a shame that the SNP are so eager to edit out that full position. If I could just make a little bit of progress. And what is absolutely, just in a moment, and what is absolutely critical is perhaps summed up in Mr Fraser's comments, because he invited us to entertain what full devolution of employment law might mean. Could we have improved work standards or more liberal? And that is exactly the point. What we must have is an absolute guarantee for all workers across the UK, because we cannot predict, as much as we might like to control, what future Scottish administrations may look like. And we cannot afford a race to the bottom. And having unqualified devolution of employment would do just that, which is why the STUC take the position that you have to have that prudent first step of a floor, which is what Ros Foyer said. I'm very happy to.
Minister.
I wonder then, if it's the Labour Party's position that they support the STU position, why have they removed any reference to the Scottish Trade Union Congress's position as we've laid out in our motion, and why is it, instead of saying that they support the devolution of employment law, it merely says that the UK government should explore how those rights could be devolved?
Daniel Johnson.
Well, if there's any ambiguity, I hope I've cleared it up, and I hope I've made myself clear in my statement this evening. And let's just see what happens in the votes this afternoon. So let's be very clear about this government's record on the Fair Work agenda, because despite the government committing to making Scotland a leading Fair Work nation by 2025, the Fair Work Convention last month described the Scottish Government's performance as mixed, and I quote: "Out of the 45 indicators considered, 19 have improved, 10 have worsened, and 14 have fluctuated or remained broadly stable. Indeed, the international comparisons are even worse. Scotland ranks 5th out of 9 compared to small countries. Our disability employment gap is 31 percentage points, second from bottom. 29% of our workers are in non-permanent work and not there by choice. That figure is 4% in Austria, 7% in Iceland. And most shockingly of all, 32% of Scottish workers say they are overqualified for the role they perform, higher than every other competitor nation. Now, the government will say that this is the fault of the UK government, but look, the lesson is clear. Yes, you need enhanced employment standards, but that must be enmeshed within a system of enhanced skills and enhanced education. That's the lesson from Austria. That's the lesson from the Nordic countries. And indeed, these are points that the Scottish Government seeks to dismiss, to make the constitutional points that it prefers to make. And so let me be clear about what the Government could do today to affect this situation. Firstly, an education and skills policy, which the recent review conducted by Jim Smithers concluded that the approach from the Scottish Government lacked leadership and direction. There is no more important resource than our people. And this Government urgently needs to bring forward recommendations on how it can put flexibility and responsiveness at the heart of the skills system. And secondly, in terms of helping families with children, it is vital that we support parents and caregivers in the workplace. The Government can and should do much more to provide flexible, all-age, all-year, wrap-around, affordable early years care. And the STUC agrees. They say that there are a number of areas where the Scottish Government could go further to support fair work. But instead of finding practical ways, practical actions within devolution and settlement, to further and improve the lives of working people, the Scottish Government is intent on furthering constitutional grievance. That is why, I think I have to close, that is why we need a UK Labour government to enact Labour's New Deal for working people, which will ban zero-hours contracts, give workers predictable contracts, outlaw fire and rehire, give day-one rights to every worker and give workers the right to switch off. That is the difference that we need. That is why the TUC General Secretary, Paul Nowak, says that this would be the biggest upgrade in workers' rights in a generation, and that is why we need a Labour government. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Johnson.